Hello and welcome to the Data Playbook YouTube channel. Today is all about KPIs. Now, I'm sure you've heard it before. KPIs stand for Key Performance Indicators. It's interesting that although it's something that's very commonly known, it's also one of the hardest things for organizations to get right. Let's start off with the definition. What is a key performance indicator? Let's break the words down. There are three words. There is key, which means it's important, performance, which means we have to measure something, an action, a set of steps, and we have indicator. This metric must indicate how you are performing and therefore it must be actionable. Let's talk through the attributes of a KPI. We know that a key performance indicator must meet these three things. It has to be important. It must tell you that you must do something. You must be able to measure it in order to then understand the performance of it. And one additional attribute I add is that it has to be clearly defined. I want to clear things up before going further. Not every number that we see is a KPI. We have metrics. We then take these metrics, these numerical values, and then slice and dice them into different dimensions in order for us to look at data in different ways. Now, a KPI is a metric, it's an important one. Building out KPIs is not about having 50 different metrics and stating these are my KPIs because just like any task that you do, if it is not prioritized, then no one's really going to work on it. You can't give me 50 tasks and then say, all these things are important. You need to be able to decipher what are the things that are important in order for you to then execute on. A KPI is also a metric that you need to measure. We're going to compare this number against something else, whether that's a target number that we have in our minds, whether that is, a number point in time of reference, or whether that is something you know from somewhere else. But it's still performance. Let's take, for example, how athletes are tracked in sports. And let's look at the NBA. This is a screenshot from stats.nba.com. As you can see, NBA players' performance is being tracked and they're measured by rebounds, three-point shots are making, number of assists, steals, blocks per game, and more. The stats vary, and depending on the position the player plays, there are some metrics that are more important than others. For example, you would expect for a shooting guard to have a high number of points per game versus any other position. Performance is really important, and so is ensuring that a KPI is actionable, a measure that cannot be acted upon. If you have no control over it, if you cannot improve it, make tweaks, or change levers, then it is not a KPI. If we have no control over what we are measuring, and I'm not saying here, are we ingesting this data and are we tracking it? It's more of a can you impact it? Can you move a lever to make that number better? Now, if you can't, then you cannot have responsibility over it. It's just a reporting metric. It's not actionable. I want to go back to what I just said about making a number better. Not sure if you noticed the word I chose, better. I'm not saying that you can increase that number or lower the number because depending on the metric you own, a lower number is actually a better number. For example, if we're talking about error rate or incidents per hour, we want those KPIs to be low. I want to introduce to you a framework on creating KPIs. This is something that I've been using throughout my career, things that I've learned and evolved over time. My hope is that it is of help to you as you're building out your own KPIs in your organization. This framework is composed of three phases. Phase one, filtering out the noise. Phase 2, prioritize. Phase 3, refine and define. Let's go over phase 1, filtering out the noise. When building out KPIs, you need to filter out the noise to get from many metrics to only a few, or maybe one KPI. I like to start off conversations around KPIs with talking about the main goals or mission that the organization is trying to achieve. From that goal, I can break down the tactical objectives that you can do to influence those goals. Next, we look at the levers that we can move to make those objectives real. And last but not least, the stakeholders involved, the audience for the metrics. This piece is key for determining priority, which we will cover in the next phase. But for phase 1, knowing our stakeholders or the audience of the metric can help set how many people are being impacted by this KPI. Now let's walk through an example of a marketing organization. At a very high level, a marketing organization or department in your company encompasses things like growth marketing, paid advertising, organic growth, maybe more. How do you then tackle the KPIs of this organization? What are some of the KPIs that they would be interested in? Maybe ROAS, return on advertising spend, total revenue, clicks per channel, conversion, number of impression, total number of new customers, and so on. Let's apply this framework and see if we can come up with at least one KPI that is suited for this marketing team. Let's begin by understanding the goal of this organization, this department, this team. What is their purpose? What do they end up doing? For marketing, the goal could be to increase brand awareness efficiently. How do we get more people to understand and know who we are as a company and be able for them to then become customers? Understanding the purpose of a particular function is important, and it is critical for you as the person who's building these KPIs or even creating this to understand what that goal and mission is for that team. Second step, from that purpose and mission and goal, what are the objectives that they're trying to build out? What are the things that they're trying to achieve? For this example, an objective could be to increase social media campaigns because that's how people are consuming content for most of our targeted demographic. We then step into levers. What are the levers that we can pull in order to achieve the objective at hand? How do we measure it? How do we have control over it? We need to define the levers that we can move in order to take action for the KPI. For marketing, this could be the amount of money spent per channel or agency. If we reduce spend on this agency, what will be the impact? For each KPI, you need to know which team owns it and or requested it. For marketing, this could be both internal and external stakeholders. ROAS, return on advertising spend, is critical in measuring performance of your marketing channels for both agencies, which are external, and the company's leadership team, which is internal. And that's how we end up with ROAS as a KPI for marketing. For the sake of simplicity, I'm only going to stick with one KPI, but in no way are marketing teams only looking at one KPI. Now that we filtered out the noise, the ROAS as the KPI, let's talk through prioritization, which is phase 2. When we are looking at only one KPI, there is no prioritization needed because there's only one metric to define. But if we had additional KPIs like conversion rate and number of impressions for a social media campaign, you need to use the information you gathered in phase 1, objectives and stakeholders, and add that to dependencies and timeliness. Dependencies focuses on data dependencies. For part of your KPI, Do you need to get that from somewhere else, from someone else, another department or company? For timeliness, are you tied to a product launch? If so, the urgency of any related KPIs is much higher than any other KPI. Most often than not, this phase is very clear to do. We then move to a very important phase, phase three, the define and refine stage. What I found often is a big component to success in KPIs is understanding your data. Mistrust in data happens when we are not speaking the same language. So defining these metrics, defining these KPIs is essential in order for everyone to get on board. Maybe you're asking, how detailed do we need to get? Well, I like to think of it this way. You need to explain a definition as if no one has ever gone to your company ever before. They don't know what anything means. They don't know what has happened in your organization, what projects you have had. You need to define it so much that a college student with no work experience can read it and say, I know what you mean. You know how much I love definitions, but beyond the definitions also is the calculations and how and where that data is sourced from. And so going through the workflow of capturing metrics and coming up with a KPI, we have to understand exactly what we are defining. Not just the name, but the math behind it. When we refer to a particular term, a business entity, some of you may know it as a data entity. Let's say a product. What are we referring to? Are we really referring to a product? Is it this shirt? Or are we actually referring it to the size and color and type of product? And the reason why nomenclature is such an important thing is because you need to be able to speak the same language and also at the same level. If I'm saying that I want to understand how much of this shirt is being sold, I want to make sure that that means the same thing for another department in the organization as it does for the whole organization. If we have teams talking about product revenue, but one is talking about revenue of just this shirt and another is saying revenue for a medium sized white shirt, then we're talking at different granularity levels. The caveat in all of this, when we're looking at KPIs, is not so much I want to know every detail that happens, because yes, you can slice and dice the data that way, but you also don't want to boil the ocean. So, when defining KPIs, we want to make sure there are some things we always do. We want to make sure that we understand the granularity of that data. We want to make sure we understand the lineage of that data. Where is that data being sourced from? And I say this because sometimes there are dependencies that we have with third parties. Sometimes these are dependencies that we have with systems that we have no control of. And maybe they're part of our own organization, but we're so large and vast that, we're not aware of where that's coming from as well. So that's why lineage is so important. Part of that lineage is also accuracy of that data. We need to also understand how frequent do we need this data? Is this a real-time view? Is this a daily view? Is this a once-a-month thing for you? What is that level of detail that we're getting out of the data, and what is the right freshness of that data? Going through this phase allows us to refine and define the KPIs. KPIs are so critical for organizations. It is what helps them know when to adapt new changes. They show organizations what levers to move in order to improve their business and when. Just remember that not all metrics are KPIs, but metrics that are important, measurable, and actionable have the potential to be KPIs. Let me know if you have any questions. Write down your comments below, what you thought about this video. And as always, don't forget to subscribe and click on the notifications button as well so you never miss out on new videos right here on the Data Playbook YouTube channel. Check us out on Twitter at The Data Playbook, on the website, thedataplaybook.com. And don't forget to listen to the Data Coach podcast on iTunes, Google Play, and Spotify. Until next time, have a great day.